Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. Today, I've got a real treat for you. We're going to be unboxing one of the weirdest things I've ever seen probably. Certainly one of the weirdest, if not the weirdest, bayonet. This one's going to be right up there with a pitchfork bayonet. Let's get this guy open to see what exactly it is we're dealing with and what era this thing's from, just exactly what it is, because you're going to think this thing is crazy, trust me. Got our trusty Spyderco here. We're going to go ahead and get this rascal open. All right. Hopefully this guy shouldn't be too hard to get open. Looks like they did a really good job of packaging him, which is appreciated. I think I would be more worried about the bayonet damaging the United States Postal Service's truck than the other way around, personally. Because I think this thing is seen a lot worse than some of their potentially not so great shipping habits, but that's a story for another day. Oh yeah, this thing's gonna be not that bad to get open at all. That looks like one of those standard envelopes, and it's all wrapped in this tape here, so they did a very good job wrapping this. Oh yeah, how do we get this open? With a knife, that's how. Alrighty. Look at that. That is what I'm talking about. We almost got her, folks. Almost got her out. We're down to the third layer here. How many layers can there be? I don't know what our record is here on the channel for layers in our unboxing videos. We've probably maybe hit 4 in one point. Some of the things we've unboxed are real abominations from other countries. But thankfully, when they come from other countries, a lot of the time they do a very good job of packaging. This one seems to have come from New York, so it did come from a communist country, but it seemed like they packaged it very well in spite of that, so we're very glad to hear that. All right. We're almost there. And that's what we're left with, the third and, I think, final layer. I may not even need a knife for this section. Kind of just open this with my fingers here. And I haven't poked my fingers yet, so that's really good. It's probably another record. Might get the knife here just to break open this last piece. There's some wonderful tape right here. Okay. I don't think it counts as another layer if the paper's wrapped around itself. It's got to be like a separate thing. Like, even though this is the same material, it's another layer if there is another thing in between. That's what I'm saying. So 3 layers. Oh, baby. Look at that, folks. What do we have here? What is this abomination? Okay. So what we have here is a World War I Ersatz Mosin Nagant bayonet. Now you might be saying, Big Sam, I've seen Mosin Nagant bayonets and this doesn't look like one. Well, you're kind of right there. This doesn't look like a standard Mosin bayonet for a couple of reasons. One, the standard bayonet kind of slides on and it's got that button you depress, right? And that's what locks it over the sight base at the front. And then it'll usually be, it'll be kind of pointed at the end, kind of like this one. Although this one's definitely seen better days. But, you know, this is just like one piece of steel is what it looks like. Very different from, you'd have like your socket piece and then your blade piece. So what we have here, it appears, is we had a piece of steel that this was definitely done by some sort of blacksmith, right? And what we have here is they would have been able to beat it into, this is actually square. So it's 4 sides, so it's basically a square, right? Going all the way up. So they would have gotten into the shape, and then they would have gotten it to taper here into a 4-sided point. So if it was just that, right, that's kind of like a pyramid, 4-sided up to a point. But then what they did at the back was, once they got that, they had to bend it, so they had to heat this part up, and then they probably got either a actual Mosin Nagant barrel or a cylindrical piece of steel with the same diameter as the front of a Mosin Nagant barrel. They heated this guy up, and then they actually probably got a big hammer and then beat it, and then actually wrapped it around the barrel, is probably what's happened here. Really interesting job. I mean, we can see there's a little bit there that they folded back over. Honestly, I mean, I couldn't have done this in my backyard. I mean, you'd have to have a forge and good amount of skill to do this, but also you'd have to have something that this would actually fit through. We can see here, that's what it looks like. Now, what about the markings on this? Well, seems here we've got a number 7 and the letter A is an alpha. Now, sometimes you have to, your mind will see one thing, and then you have to sort of turn it to a side and then flip it over to make sure that you're not looking at it the wrong way. But in this case, it does appear that's what we have. Now, what does this mean? Well, we don't have enough context to really tell us. Could be some sort of, a manufacturer's marking, obviously. Now, if we flip this over here, we see a little bit more. We see this right here says Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-T-D. The D is a little bit fainter, but you can kind of see that there. Schmidt. I don't know if it's Schmidt, but if you say it Schmidt or Schmidt. Schmidt. I think it's Schmidt, where the T and the D kind of make a T sound. I'm not very good at that, but I'll do my best. And then there, I don't know if I flip it over the other way. Is that an F as in Foxtrot, maybe? It's kind of what that looks like. But that actually looks like one of those really big pipe wrenches. But I don't think they would have put a pipe wrench mark on this bayonet. That might just be an F. So there's that, and then the other 2 sides, there are no markings. And then on the rest of the guy, there aren't really any markings to speak of. So, I mean, these could be some sort of proof or quality control markings here. What the 7 and the alpha mean exactly, I'm not too sure. But the next question you're probably wondering is, Big Sam, how do you actually attach this to a Mosin bayonet? Well, that's a really good question. So what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to see if we can get this actually on a gun. Now, based on past experiences, this is very hit-miss, okay, for a number of reasons. But even on your standard 9130 bayonets from World War II with that little push button there with the nice socket, some of those won't always fit on every single gun. Those do have to be sized, and even when they're sized, there's still differences with the sight bases and other things to consider that might cause it to actually not fit on some rifles, whereas it will fit on some others. So going back to a very ghetto, I guess rudimentary, which is a little nicer word to put it, produced bayonet from World War I, and who knows if this was like run over by a horse or a carriage or something, if this is actually still in the original proper dimensions, but we're going to just try it on something. So I'm going to get this out of the way here, and then I'm going to close my knife so I don't cut my fingers. And then what we're going to do is get a Mosin. Fetch me the Mosin. Oh boy, big Mosin. Let me get this guy over here so you can actually see him. Make sure I can actually get this on camera. Okay. I might have to move my camera slightly so y'all can see this. Okay. Well, here's the muzzle. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is safety check the rifle. And I'm just going to, you can't see it, but I have the bolt open and we are clear, so I'm not going to worry about accidentally shooting myself while attempting to attach a very horrible looking bayonet. But you know what? We're going to give it a go. I'm going to get my camera to focus, right? Okay. So we got this guy here. So theoretically, this can work one of two ways. It can either go on like this or like this. So we're going to try it both. Because it's probably going to hit the sight base. So we're actually going to try it this way first. Okay. Well, as you can see, it kind of clamps on there, but I can already tell that's a very tight fit. And see, I can kind of move the bayonet up and down. You're seeing that right here. But seems to be a little bit too tight for this particular weapon. Now, I'm be careful here because I don't want my gun to fall on the floor. That would be bad. So we can try it again here. It definitely seems to be that the diameter of this is just a little bit too small for the diameter of the front of this barrel. And you know, that doesn't really surprise me. Like the Ersatz bayonets that I've looked at, including this one, I've only looked at a couple, but they definitely seem to be a little bit out of spec for rifles. And again, it doesn't surprise me because these are extremely hard to find, these weird, rudimentary World War I Mosin Nagant bayonets. And generally, they're going to be a little bit out of spec from when they were made, probably. But that's not to say that even when this was made, this would still fit on this rifle. So if we pull this back from time right when it was made, it still may not even fit on this rifle. But it goes on a little bit. Seems to be, now the barrels are tapered, so as you get further away from the muzzle, it will get a little bit wider. So this one, if it's tight right here, you're not gonna, you can try to force it, but you shouldn't. It's not gonna get much past there if you're having a lot of issues. You can try it the other way. Now you can see this way, obviously this is not how you're supposed to do it, but someone may have actually marched with it like this, because a lot of times you see photos in World War I, or at least of World War II, I think mainly probably World War II actually, because the bayonets are a little easier to detach. You see guys marching with the bayonet actually fixed backwards on the rifle, so it's not as tall. It keeps the center of mass a little bit lower when it's on your shoulder, and you don't have to worry about it hitting like tree branches, because with a bayonet on a Mosin, even when it's on your back, these things are so tall that they will hit things you wouldn't think they would hit because they're so long. But it's interesting that this is actually pretty well sized. So it seems like this diameter is fine. This one is just a little bit too narrow. Now, that's not to say this won't fit on any one. Now, one of the things you can do is try to size this. Now, that's not something I'm interested in doing on a bayonet like this. That's basically the only one I've ever seen. On a typical Mosin Nagant bayonet, sizing these is not a problem. In fact, you've seen in one of our previous videos, we made this horrible sizing tool that you basically put in through the socket piece of a standard bayonet and push it through with a hydraulic press to size it. We're not going to do that on this one. But it is really interesting to at least try this. And, of course, we feature a lot of Mosins here on the channel. So I think as time goes on, we might try this on some more. But I did want one thing I wanted to check here, and maybe I need to turn the gun sideways. I wanted to check the height of the sight base. And this is a particularly important because most M91 rifles that you'll typically see are from Finland, okay? And if they're from Finland, they probably have the retrofitted Imo Lottie designed taller front sight, because Finland shot these rifles without the bayonet affix. They sighted them without a bayonet. They had a taller front sight. Well, what that translates to with, sorry about that, sight fitting, or bayonet fitting, excuse me, is it may not exactly work, because the Finns actually ran into this problem. Some of their sockets on the older bayonets had the sockets. I mean, this one is so rudimentary, it doesn't have anything, but they had this little, I'm trying to think of the word, like a little lever on it, and it would basically rotate, but to get it on, it would rotate behind the sight base, so you'd have to get the sight through it. But if the front sight was too tall, it would actually hit. And so what I was wondering on this guy is what happens if the front sight is too tall? But it seems that what happens here, and I can demonstrate how this works, although I can't put it on this rifle. We have it turned so it's upside down like this, right? Because if I turn it this way, it's going to hit the front sight base, and that's no good at all. So it's got to be open here on the bottom. So it would go on like this, okay? So theoretically, you could slide it through, and then you just keep on sliding it until right here, you can see it would hit the front sight base. And then at that point, since this guy is past it, you can actually twist it. So you could start to twist it on like that. So the way this probably would work is, you can see I would now twisted it on, and then the sight base would basically be through here. So it would be right here, and let me zoom in on that. Okay, so the sight base would basically be here, and then so this would be the muzzle. So this would be offset to the left if you were holding the rifle of the muzzle, but it would look like this when it was on. Absolutely fascinating. Now this would have to be sort of a tight-ish fit, and the thing there is, again, the sight base, I guess the length here of the sight base can vary on different rifles, especially back in World War I and before. So this, I could imagine they had to have a little bit looser tolerances on. Really, I think the big fitment was right here. You wanted this to be rather tight, because you didn't want this to just rotate off. Because the thing about this, it's ghetto. There's not a lot holding it on here, really. There's only friction. Whereas the actual Russian bayonets, and one of them we just gave away, by the way, had that little lever that turns, and that has the screw to secure it and basically tighten it. And that was probably a better design for at least holding the bayonet on. But I tell you what, I never would have thought to design a Mosin bayonet like this. I think most people wouldn't have thought to design a bayonet like this. But this is awesome. It works, and it's actually quite reflective of just the Mosin Nagant in general. It's very rudimentary. It's cheap and simple to produce, relatively. And it's just a really fascinating piece of history. I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. Very hard to find good info on this. Now, going back to the Schmidt thing, I've seen two different sources that state this bayonet is Austrian, okay? But that being said, I actually don't have any good tangible evidence to point to this, other than what two sources have said. And who knows, maybe one of the sources saw that the other source said that. And then at that point, we're just playing a game of telephone. Well, why, right? It's one thing to say it's Austrian, but the other question is why. Now, Schmidt is a very German-sounding name, so obviously it could be Austrian, but I don't have any evidence right now to point to the fact that this is not German. So this could also be German. because we know Germany had a ton of Mosins in World War I, and this could have been something that, well, they produced. Although you could also argue that a lot of the Ersatz stuff we would see from Austria tended to be more ghetto than the kind we would see from Germany. It really depends on what it is we're talking about, though. Painting that with just a blanket statement like that is not necessarily something I would do, but we'd really have to define what it is in what area of Ersatz criteria are we talking about for each country. But I think this could have been something made in Germany. Now, if I find any more good info on this, I'll update this, because this could very well be Austrian, and I just haven't found enough info about it yet. But, you know, like everything else, we'll continue doing research, and if we have any updates, we'll have to push it out here on the channel. Let me know your thoughts on this crazy thing in the comments below. Let me know if you think this would have been a good idea to make, if you think this would have been a successful bayonet. But it just goes to show like how desperate that country was to produce such a ghetto bayonet for a rifle that they captured, okay? So whether it be Austria, Hungary, or Germany, right, they would have captured an M91 rifle. So this isn't something that they would have chose to use. It's something they sort of had, so like, okay, we're going to use these. And not only are we going to use these ghetto captured rifles, we're going to make these even more ghetto locally produced bayonets. Those were some desperate times, folks. That's why I like keeping these things around, because, man, this really shows how desperate the times were back then. But also, it's really cool that Mosins were still used in this old age of these just really skilled blacksmiths that could do really interesting things like this. Pretty cool, folks. All right, so that's our look today at this crazy bayonet. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Don't forget that next Sunday, we are starting Dragoon Week, which I'm very excited about. So if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you like more Mosin Nagant content like this. Let me know if y'all have any prayer requests, and we'll see you next time.